Have you ever felt that you'll never be good enough? Have you ever watched other people succeed and secretly thought, I could never do what they do? If you've ever felt that way, then today's story might change the way you view yourself forever. And before we begin, please like if you're also struggling to overcome negative thoughts in your life. And also leave a comment, I won't give up, to motivate myself and those who read this story. Ethan Cole is 29 years old. He lives alone in a small apartment in the bustling, cold city of Chicago. Every morning, Ethan wakes up at 6:30 sharp. He makes coffee. He puts on his usual shirt. He takes a crowded train to the design firm where he's worked for almost 5 years. His life seems stable on the outside. He has a good job, a decent salary, no debt. It wasn't that hard, but only Ethan knew that inside he was slowly breaking apart, because every day he lived with a terrifying thought, I'm not good enough. That thought was like an invisible voice that kept popping into his head. When Ethan saw a colleague present a great idea, the voice appeared. When he looked at his own designs, the voice echoed again. Even when he went home and stood in front of the mirror at night, he still heard it whispering, other people are better than you. You're just average. No one really needs you. At first, Ethan thought it was just a temporary feeling, but gradually, it became a part of his life. He began to doubt all his decisions. A simple design, he revised it dozens of times. A short email to a client, he read it obsessively over and over again. Even when receiving praise, he thought the other person was just being polite. Self-doubt is like darkness. It doesn't appear suddenly, but silently devours a person bit by bit. And Ethan lived in that darkness for years. One winter afternoon, the company suddenly announced a major project. It was a promotional campaign for a well-known firm, a project every designer in the company dreamed of. The winner would have a chance at a promotion, a raise, and they might even become the creative team leader. When the announcement came, the entire office became excited. Everyone was talking nonstop. Everyone wanted to show off their skills. But Ethan, he remained silent, because at that moment there was only one thought in his head. I'm sure I'm going to fail. That night, Ethan was left alone at the company. Outside the window, snow was falling, blanketing the entire city. Inside the cold office, the light of the computer screen shone on his tired face. Ethan stared at the design on the screen for a long time. He tried to be creative. He tried to come up with new ideas. He tried to do better, but the more he tried, he felt helpless. What a shame. He murmured. Then he deleted it all. Once, twice, 10 times. Every time he looked at his work, he saw only flaws. Not beautiful enough. Not creative enough. Not special enough. Finally, Ethan dropped his head onto the desk. For the first time in a long time, he felt so tired he wanted to give up. He began to wonder, maybe I just don't have talent. Maybe I'll always be ordinary. And just then, the office door suddenly opened. A soft voice sounded from behind it. You still here, Ethan? He looked up. It was Amelia, his colleague, always the calmest and most optimistic in the company. But Ethan had no idea that conversation that night would completely change his life. Amelia placed her hot coffee on the table and pulled up a chair to sit opposite Ethan. The cold, white light in the office made everything feel quiet. She stared at Ethan's computer screen for a long moment. The design was still unfinished. Her notes had been haphazardly erased and rewritten. The chaotic layers of color reflected her current state of mind. Amelia asked softly, How many times have you revised this? Ethan smiled faintly. You don't want to know. About how many times? Probably more than 20 times. Amelia was silent for a few seconds before asking again. And after each revision? Do you feel better? The question made Ethan freeze. He looked down at his hands. No. His voice was very low. The more I revise, the worse it gets. Amelia sighed softly. Ethan, the problem isn't the design. She frowned. Then where's the problem? She looked him straight in the eye. The problem is how you see yourself. The room fell silent. Outside the window, the snow was still falling. Ethan chuckled softly. as if in disbelief. Do you think a few words of encouragement can change everything? Amelia shook her head. No, but negative thoughts can destroy everything. That statement left Ethan speechless, because deep down, he knew Amelia was right. Amelia leaned back in her chair and slowly began to tell her story. 3 years ago, I was exactly like you. Ethan looked up, surprised. Really? He nodded. Back then, I always felt inferior. I compared myself to others. And eventually, I started to hate myself. Amelia's voice was calm, but Ethan could sense the sadness in it. I didn't even dare to submit ideas to clients. I'm afraid of being ridiculed, afraid of failure, afraid of others realizing I'm untalented. Ethan listened silently, because every word she said was exactly what he was experiencing. Then what happened? He asked quietly. Amelia smiled faintly. Someone said something to me that I'll never forget. She stared at Ethan for a long moment, then slowly said, "What you think about every day becomes who you are." Ethan frowned slightly. Sounds like those motivational books. Amelia laughed. I used to think that too. But then I tried to change. How can I change? Stop underestimating yourself. Ethan was shocked. Do you know what's scariest? Amelia continued. Not being underestimated by others, but destroying yourself every day. Those words pierced Ethan's heart, because he realized every day he did that to himself. Every morning when he woke up, he told himself he wasn't good enough. Every time he made a mistake, he called himself a failure. Every time he saw someone else succeed, he dragged himself down even deeper. Ethan unconsciously lowered his head. For the first time, he felt exhausted by his own thoughts. Amelia stood up and walked to the window. The city lights reflected off her face. Ethan, nothing gets better by hating yourself. The words made his throat tighten. After a long pause, he asked softly, "But what if I really am not good enough?" Amelia turned to look at him. This time her gaze was serious. Then study. Strive to be better. Don't judge yourself before you even start. Then he took a pen and wrote a single line on a small piece of paper. I'm learning. I'm trying to be better. He placed the paper in front of Ethan. Read this every morning. It's okay if you don't believe it. Just don't keep saying you're worthless. Ethan stared at the words for a long time. He was still full of doubts. But somehow, for the first time in years, he was starting to want to try to change. The next morning, Ethan woke up later than usual. He had barely slept all night. Amelia's words kept ringing in his head. Nobody gets better by hating themselves. Ethan sat quietly on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then he noticed a small piece of paper next to his laptop. I'm learning, I'm growing. He picked it up. A faint, sad smile played across his lips. Part of him still thought it was ridiculous. How could a few simple words change someone's life? But in the end, he stood in front of the mirror anyway. The familiar, tired face reappeared. The eyes were full of stress. The look of someone who had lost confidence for far too long. Ethan took a deep breath. Then he slowly said, I'm learning. I'm growing. His voice was so soft it was almost inaudible. Everything still felt strange. But for the first time, he wasn't saying he was useless. It was just a small change, but his heart suddenly felt a little lighter. When he arrived at the company, Ethan reopened the design from the night before. Following his old habit, he intended to find the first mistake, but then he stopped. He remembered Amelia's words. Stop blaming yourself. Ethan looked at the design again. This time, he tried to find something positive. A few seconds passed. Then he suddenly realized, this lighting is actually pretty good. Ethan was shocked. This was the first time in a long time he had praised himself. Not perfect, not great. But at least it wasn't as bad as he thought. It was a strange feeling, like a small glimmer of light appearing in a room that had been dark for years. Throughout the day, Ethan worked slower. He wasn't constantly erasing everything anymore. When he made a mistake, he corrected it instead of beating himself up. When he felt anxious, he looked at the small piece of paper next to the screen. I'm learning. I'm growing. At the end of the day, the design was finally finished. Ethan sat quietly staring at it. It wasn't perfect, But this time, he didn't hate it anymore. And just then, an unexpected email appeared on the computer screen. The email title made Ethan's heart race. National Creative Project Selection Results Announcement. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he opened the email. He swallowed hard. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Only one thought crossed his mind. I'm definitely eliminated. Ethan closed his eyes for a few seconds, then slowly read each line on the screen. We're pleased to announce you have been selected for the final presentation round. Ethan paused. He read it again. Then a third time. The words were still the same. Selected. In that moment, the whole world went silent. In all these years, this was the first time Ethan had felt like he truly had a chance. Not pity. Not just a polite nudge. But a real chance. But just seconds later, the fear returned. Ethan's throat tightened. No, they must have picked the wrong person. The familiar feeling of inferiority began to drag him down again. He imagined himself standing in front of a crowd, being questioned, being ridiculed, having everyone realize he wasn't as good as they thought. Ethan's hands grew cold. Just then, Amelia approached. She looked into Ethan's tense face and gently asked, "What's wrong?" Ethan silently handed her the laptop screen. After reading the email, her eyes immediately lit up. "Ethan, you did it!" But Ethan just shook his head. "No, I can't stand in front of so many people. I'll ruin everything." Amelia stared at him for a long moment. Then she softly said, "Ethan, being afraid doesn't mean you're weak. It means this is really important to you." That statement left Ethan speechless. For the first time, he began to understand that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about moving forward, even when your heart is trembling. The day of the final presentation, Ethan stood in front of the auditorium door, his hands freezing cold. Inside, dozens of talented designers were preparing their presentations. The sound of conversation, the rustle of paper, bright lights. All of this made Ethan's heart pound. For a moment, he really wanted to turn and run. The negative voice from years ago came back. "You don't belong here. Everyone will laugh at you." Ethan lowered his head. His breath trembled. But then, he remembered Amelia, remembering the days when he tried to change, remembering the words that saved him from those dark days. "I'm learning. I'm growing." Ethan closed his eyes for a few seconds. Then, he walked into the auditorium. That day's presentation wasn't perfect. Sometimes he forgot his lines. Sometimes his voice would tremble. But Ethan didn't give up. He continued his presentation. He continued to explain his idea with all his heart. And for the first time in his life, he no longer felt ashamed of himself. In the end, Ethan didn't win first prize. But when he walked off the stage, everyone stood and applauded him, not because he was perfect, but because they saw his effort, his courage, and a man who had conquered himself. A few months later, Ethan became a full-time member of a major creative project. But the most valuable thing he received wasn't the new job. It was the fact that he finally learned to believe in himself. And maybe, if you're doubting yourself today, remember, no one is born perfect. Everyone learns to improve every day. If this story touched your heart, please like it so others can see it. And leave a comment. I will keep trying to spread motivation to everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more meaningful and inspiring stories.